Welcome to the Marvel Cinematic University podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Canton III, and we are continuing our coverage of the Disney Plus Star Wars series, The Acolyte. The episode is titled Day, episode 4, halfway through, and it's a good day as any to go to MC University patreon.com/MC University pod, I should say, to get our bonus content. And I gotta tell you, folks, right now the Patreon is cooking. We got things going on in there. We just recorded last night Mission Impossible Fallout with our pals Rod and Teej. We already have the Father's Day, the Daddy's Pod up 2 hours 50 minutes. We got Bad Boys Ride or Die there. We got just a little bit of me and Jake talking about Glenn Powell's greatness in Hitman. We still have the subscriber mailbag along those lines. In July, folks, let me tell you, for $3, there's a lot going on with this Patreon. We're about to do a bunch of content in July. It should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. And obviously, you not only get what we have coming out soon, you also get the back catalog of everything that we've had. Plus, get into the Discord, talk with all our fine folks, and have a good time and all those things. And of course, supporting the show, which we appreciate nonetheless as you support this show. But yes, as we continue, and of course, if you're looking at this screen right now and you see these two wonderful faces, please like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel and all those things. And with that being said, let me introduce you to the super producer of this podcast, Jake Christie. Jake, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm currently living as a disciple of Grimace. So shouts to Grimace, the savior of the New York Mets. He can do no wrong. I'm as happy to be a baseball fan as I have been in a long time.
Oh my gosh, they resuscitated the Mets. It's incredible. Like we had Gary Cohen not a month ago talking about the sun will come up tomorrow. And now things have changed
because of one purple man named Grimace. They're 7-0 since Grimace threw out that first pitch. They're 7-0.
Well, there you go. You can't go wrong with Grimace. The purple man cometh and taketh the Mets to the promised land. But in the meantime, the Acolytes, as we get into day. So I think the thing that comes across my mind as I watched this episode and as it concluded was the Jedi. Wow, for a bunch of people who are incredibly powerful, who or at least should be powerful, this Sith guy or gal or person, I should say, just washed the fuck out of them at the end of the episode. That's like kind of like at least the first thing that sticks out to me. What about you?
I mean, I think that I'll say that this episode feels like, I'm not going to say filler episode because that's a term I don't like and it's also not applicable, but it feels like this episode, I would have liked a little more to happen either at the beginning or the end. It feels like this is very transitory. And the only real event that happens is the reveal that the Wookiee, I forget his name, sorry, is already dead. And so, like, I would have wished there was more going on. But as what you're saying, I think that, one, that underscores how powerful the Sith is. And I think that we found that a powerful Sith is more powerful than a powerful Jedi generally. You know, Anakin did what he did. He tore through a lot of Jedi. And Palpatine, obviously. And I also think, like, we've seen a lot. The Jedi we've seen in Star Wars movies are the very powerful ones. They're the Skywalkers. They're Qui-Gon Jinn. These are like Jedi Masters and Jedi Knights. We're just taking it for their word that the standard Jedi is super powerful. Not to say that they're not, but like maybe they're not as powerful as they maybe should be. Maybe this is another sign of the way that it's atrophying. Maybe if you have an academy that produces hundreds of thousands of Jedi, maybe it's impossible to have them all be powerful enough to take on a Sith. Who, maybe.
Hey, I was talking in the Discord earlier with our guy Tagashi, and I gotta admit, to see our pal Kel Naka taken out this quick
off screen
was a little disappointing.
Yeah, I was really disappointed by that. Just because you want to see a Wookiee do some lightsaber shit. Like I'm not. I sometimes think, like, you know, I'm an evolved person. I like good story, etc., etc. But in exchange for dealing with all that, I do occasionally need to see a Wookiee use a lightsaber, and I didn't get to see that.
That was tough to me because you always like to see the big people roll around and do some crazy stuff, and especially this is a Jedi Wookiee. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, at least a little something along those lines. But besides the actual end of the episode, I think the plot lines, there's two plot lines to me that really pique my interest. One,
Mhm.
which is one that's continued throughout the show so far, is Vernestra.
Yeah.
Vernestra just seems like she's hiding something. It
Mhm.
seems like she's hiding something, or she knows something, or something along those lines. She wants to keep all of this information of everything that's been going on with this assassin and the Sith Lord away from the High Council. And even while this takes place a century before the Phantom Menace, it does feel like, based off of everything that she said, it seems like the Senate and all of the folks who are, have like leaned on the Jedi
Mhm.
for their knowledge and their power, seem like they're starting to feel some type of way about how the Jedi do things. So they
Mhm.
don't want those things to continue further. So Vernestra wants to hide the things, and that on its own is very fascinating. And
Yeah.
the way that she kind of critiques Soul and criticizes him for how did he not know that May was still alive, which I hope at some point we go back to
Yeah.
what happened in that flashback and see what happened there. But what did you think about Vernestra and everything that we saw in, and it doesn't take much. It's
Mm.
only a scene.
I have to say, shouts to Leslie Headland for having the bravery to cast her wife as the stick in the mud, because that's her. I don't know if they're married, but they have a child together. So shouts to her, because most people are like, oh, I'm going to cast my spouse as the cool character. She's not cool at all. I respect it. But I think that I really like that because it feels. I hope that there's no reveal that she is part of like this Sith conspiracy, because I
Mhm.
think that it is more real and I think more interesting that like, yeah, this is how shit happens. Like this is how things fall. Where like if you're so afraid of the appearance of incompetence that you start to be corrupt, then like no shit, the Senate's not going to trust you anymore. You know what I mean? Like she's actually just making the problem worse by trying to prevent a scandal. Because if the Senate find out about it now, it's even worse. And you understand that like this is such a weird relationship between a galactically democratically elected, well, democratic in some ways, Senate and unelected warrior monks that are working side by side. I know I keep harping on this, but that is a weird relationship, and I think that her wanting to hide this is emphasizes the weirdness of that relationship because the Jedi are only to be trusted as such as they are infallible. Because you wouldn't keep monks around if their scrolls kept being wrong. You
Yeah.
wouldn't keep monks around if they didn't actually know what they were talking about. And so I think that it's really interesting to me, and she's being very pragmatic about this, but she's being pragmatic in the way that like a human's pragmatic. That like she's protecting her own institution, and so, yeah, I'm really interested to see how she, develops. And I will say, I really hope that there's not another shooter drop because I think most boring thing would be that she's secretly a Sith, and it's like, okay, that that I always feel like that's lazy whenever because I feel like in real life there are a lot of people who do the wrong things because they are trying to keep up appearances. And I always hate when that turns out to be no, they were just lying about keeping up appearances. They actually were ultimate evil. And it's like, okay, well, thanks.
I feel like, to your point on that, there would definitely be more layers and more of a coloring if this was somebody who was just trying to hold on to the Jedi
Yeah,
power. That's more interesting than finding out like it's the old like film noir. Oh my gosh, this is a Sith Lord.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
I'm wondering where I feel like there has to be, at least in the next episode or two, something a little bit deeper in terms of getting to know what her whole deal is
I agree.
overall. I know in previous trailers we've seen her wield the lightsaber.
Hmm.
Actually, it's almost like a whip, a
Hmm.
lightsaber that turns into a whip that she
Yeah.
has. So I want to see her in action. So that part is interesting. And then the other plot line that kind of takes my focus is May and Osha, the twins.
Can I just
And
quickly say something about Vernestra before we move on to Maynosha?
absolutely, go ahead.
I think, and I'm interested to see her backstory because, and I know I keep relating this back to the real world, but I feel like of all Star Wars things, this feels so relevant that a lot of times, frustratingly, some people who find themselves defending crumbling institutions are people who have good reason to those institutions did something for them. That like a lot of things, in American politics that I find annoying, certain members, be frank, members of Congress who are like Democrats or whatever. You're like, well,
Hmm.
okay, they come from a minority group that Democrats did a lot for, so you understand why the more that they
Right.
don't want to tear everything down. And I think that it's interesting. Like, so what was her relationship with the Jedi? Because I would bet that she probably is from a horrible situation where the Jedi took her out of it, and so her defending the Jedi is significantly more important than her. And then I'd be more sympathetic to that. I think that that's more interesting than her just being, general. Da, da, da.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, to what you said earlier about being the stick in the mud, like there feels like there's more behind what's going on there, and you would like it to be something fruitful
Mm-hmm.
and something that we can really sink our teeth into. But May and Osha, the twins, I
Mm-hmm.
think the thing that comes across in this episode more so than ever is that now that May knows that Osha is alive,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like the whole "I have a manifesto to kill all these
Yeah.
folks" it's kind of just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the fervor, the anger is
Mm-hmm.
just not there. The basically she tells old boy, I think Kamir is his name, that I basically don't want to do this
Mm-hmm.
anymore. Like I'm out of this and stuff like that. And it furthers because on Osha's side, we get her still wanting to stay away from this entirely. Um, because as she tries to say to leave without saying goodbye to Soul,
Mm-hmm.
she does speak to Jackie, and earlier today I read that Daphne Keene confirmed
Mm-hmm.
that Jackie has a romantic interest in
Mm-hmm.
Osha. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why she was a little bit on her case as
Mm-hmm.
to you should stay with us
Uh-huh.
and hang around.
Mm-hmm.
So that part is interesting. So we'll see if they continue to play on that going forward. But I think the thing with Osha, why does she want to stay away? Is it just that she believes her sister is a murderer, or is it the idea that again, with the power that she potentially has, she knows that if she gets too close to
Mm-hmm.
it, there's a chance that she could get turned. That's
I
that's in the
think
back of my
I think
mind.
that that's part of it, and I think that that's definitely part of it, and I also think that she knows. Like, I don't think it's because she's like afraid of her sister for the murder she did. I
Hmm.
think on some level she's also like, if she, is turned out does turn out to be this horrible person who's, you know, beyond saving, I still don't think I'd be able to kill her or be able to stop her. And like, I think that she's protecting herself and protecting the Jedi in some way, and specifically like Soul. Like, I'm a liability. I can't be trusted to be. And I think that that's really interesting because once again, as I mentioned last week, which I think I'm glad that they kind of kept going. Like, these characters are interesting because they're not ideologically driven. They're driven by the relationship, and that's why I like that. Even though I think some people would be mad, like, "Oh, she's not giving up her quest." It's like, no, she was doing this shit because out of revenge, because she had nothing else in her life. But if Osha's still alive, that is a much. But she's not a Sith ideologue. She's not down with the cause that
Right.
much. She's more concerned about their anger.
Right, exactly. And the way that you kind of see all of those things come off of May in the episode, like all like as it just evolves and the way that she speaks and the way that she talks
Mm,
to Kamir throughout, and then on the other side you have Osha coming through, and you can see like the genuine discomfort, the
mm-hmm,
genuine I don't really want to be here, but I
mm-hmm,
have to be here. The back and
mm-hmm.
forth with
Yep,
Yord,
like Eric
and
Bledsoe on the Suns.
yeah, that's a good one.
Thank you.
That is a good one. Yeah, so like she has the back and forth with Yord about she wants to carry a blaster, and then he says no, and she says like I don't want to go into this battle without a weapon, and then Yord says the interesting thing is like it's not just about you facing your sister, it's
Mm-hmm,
you facing yourself,
mm-hmm,
and that continues to be a thing that you want to see going forward. And then on top of that, when old Sith Lord uh is about to take out all the Jedi at the end of the
mm-hmm,
episode, he sees her and he kind of just throws her off to the side, like I got plans for you later.
mm-hmm,
I'll deal with you later. I'll deal with these folks now. So I think that the how the two sisters resolve their relationship obviously is an important plot
mm-hmm,
point, but also where this lands in terms of the Sith person and Osha and the emotional conflict that she's getting pulled at from both
mm-hmm,
sides in terms of the Jedi and her sister. So that's a very
Yeah.
fascinating thing.
And the thing I'm wondering about, and I think that this could make for some really good conflict, is I'm gonna say before I ask this question, I'm gonna say I think the answer is yes, and I think that's the more interesting answer. Is did the Sith Lord know Osha was alive this whole time, and is that part of the plan?
Feels like it feels like it has been.
And so, well, how does May feel about that? You know, I think that that's an interesting question that we could see. Um,
Right, because I mean, to go back to the flashback and to see how these two sisters have dealt with their relationship, I think it was a great point that you made that last week when we were discussing the way that they are and the way that they were,
mhm,
is that May actually more so than anything else was very buttoned up, was
mhm,
very into the idea of doing things, and Osha was just like, I'm out here trying shit.
mhm,
So there's a distinct difference between the two of them, and maybe the fact that May would take instruction from somebody,
yeah,
it what made her easy to manipulate as
mhm,
opposed to Osha, who there needs to be a more elaborate and more long drawn out playbook and scheme to get her into the clutches of the Sith, into the dark side.
yeah,
That remains to be an interesting point. I'm picking up what you're putting down there.
yeah. I think that this shows a really good demonstration of the fact that like one's temperament in regards to structure is actually unrelated to whether they're being good or bad. Because like May is a rule follower, but being a rule follower is actually value neutral. You could be a rule follower for people with horrible rules, and in the same way that Osha is like rebellious against rules, that doesn't mean that she's a bad person. In fact, it makes her less susceptible to being taken by corrupt institutions. So like I think it's obviously there's the chart of lawful good, yada yada, and I think it's very interesting that these characters seem to be obviously not entirely because May has ambivalence and Osha has ambivalence, but May is a lawful evil and Osha is a chaotic good. You know that they are not, and I think we almost always just see either lawful good or neutral good. We very rarely see chaotic good, and we almost never see, unless it's like a dictator character, a character who is like a goody two shoes in a lot of ways for being evil. But like there are a lot of those in the world.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to what we see going forward, like I think there is definitely going to be another flashback. I feel like we have to go back at least once more. It's clear that this fight is going to continue to start episode 5, to start the back half of the season. We'll see what becomes of that. I'm gonna guess that some Jedi are gonna get offed here just to show that this Sith Lord is very powerful. And well, we didn't talk much about Soul in this episode, but I think the way that Vernestra talked to
Hmm.
him, I wonder how that will play in him eventually. Because I don't even want to say that he's in over his head per se,
No.
but I think because he is so sentimental and really in touch with his emotions, you have to wonder if he's not sensing that there's a greater threat at play, not only from the Sith Lord, but from possibly his own folks in Vernestra
Yeah.
and all of that. So how is that going to play? He is now the only Jedi of the four
Hmm.
that were listed to be murdered that's left.
Hmm.
So this now puts him into supreme focus for the back half of the season. So his character has a very interesting outlook too. I want to see where that goes.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I agree that he's not in over his head, but and I think that like he's kind of out on his own is the problem. That he's crawling out on the branch by himself. And like, Jackie is there with him. Shouts to Jackie. I saw someone point out, why does Star Wars have someone with a Bushwick haircut? And just shouts to her. It's like they're out there. Yord's not really out there, but he's and so like maybe if he had the entire institution of the Jedi Order on his side within like being compassionate towards this, etc., he'd be able to work it out. But like he is very vulnerable where he is because he doesn't have the support of the Jedi. He has an enemy he really doesn't understand, and so like I don't think he's doing the wrong thing by taking a compassionate angle here and by trying to be understanding. But like, it's hard to do that when it's just you and a 4'9", white, and I mean the color white woman.
Yeah. So now that we're through 4 episodes, I want to ask you, how are you feeling about this show?
I like the first 2 episodes better than the last 2, to be
Hmm.
honest. But I think it's a very interesting show. The characters are really interesting to me, and so I think that that's, like, what's really keeping me invested. Um, because as I've said enough times where you could, you know, you could take a shot. Character is why you tune into television. Plot is not why you tune into television. So like what the plot is, I'm interested in, and I have theories and stuff. But I'm interested in I'm invested in it because I'm invested in seeing what happens to these characters. You know, like the plot is not crazy complex and interesting in a way, not
Hmm.
and nor does it need to be, because I'm like, I want to know what happens with May and Osha. These characters are interesting to me. I want to know what happens. Does even with the side characters, like does Jackie get disillusioned the same way that Osha did? Because she clearly is very sympathetic to some of Osha's vibes, and is she going to like will something happen here that makes her realize like, oh no, yeah, Osha was right about the Jedi. And Soul, what happens to a good man in a broken institution? Like these are all because of the characters I'm invested, and so that's really a credit to the show, because that's a thing that I found when I found myself struggling with some of these Star Wars shows, Ahsoka and Book of Boba Fett specifically. It's because I'm like, I just I don't have what I'm not actually like emotionally attached to the fate of these people, and I am through 4 episodes, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, in comparison to some of the other ones, I think I think the funny thing about Ahsoka is there is so much that came before it that for a lot of folks, you and I included, who had not seen Rebels or Clone Wars or any of those animated series that detailed all those backstories and gave folks all of the emotional mapping that you can have for characters like that are so popular, all of those beats will never hit the same.
No,
So as far as Ahsoka is concerned, that's that.
yeah,
Boba Fett, I just think a lot of folks thought that character was cool and they wanted to
mm-hmm.
capitalize on that, and
Uh-huh.
then you could tell that they didn't have enough for it
Yeah.
when they decided to make a whole episode in the back half of that season
Uh-huh.
dedicated to their other
Yeah.
guy with a helmet.
Well, because the problem ultimately is the show that people wanted of Boba Fett was Boba Fett going around the galaxy being a bounty hunter, and the Mandalorian already exists. So it's like
Yeah.
Boba Fett becomes like a fucking mayor. Is this the show?
It's really what it became, and it was kind of like, what happened there?
Yeah,
Like,
I'm not that mad about. Some people are really mad about the show, but
yeah, some people were mad.
I
Yeah,
kind of my whole vibe was like when they first announced it, I'm like, this could be cool, but is Boba Fett actually an interesting character, or did he just have a cool looking outfit when you were 12? And the answer really is the second. So
yes, yes. I will say that solo Mandalorian episode that they dropped in there
mhm.
was pretty cool, and it's not like funny. Like they brought Luke Skywalker back in that, and it's like, what is he doing there? That's just a
just
very,
there's
very
just
odd.
it's just like honestly, this is gonna. I think our audience is good. If we had a wider audience, they would be mad at this. But I
Uh
think the
huh.
Filoniverse is guilty of a lot of the stuff that the MCU is accused of when it comes to like jangling keys. Like that's what it's really like.
Yeah, like there was a bit of a we're gonna post credit this and give a nod to that.
Yeah.
And that's why those came off of that. But as far as this show is
Hmm.
concerned, I do feel that yes, I do think last week's episode, while I did not hate it, while I thought that there were a lot of good
Hmm.
points in it, I do think it took away from what the initial two episodes established. And I think that just from a structure standpoint, that if you wanted to really do the flashback thing, do it later in the season when everybody is completely
Hmm.
established, and then you kind of know, and then you can really dive into the
Hmm.
mystery. Take an episode
Yeah.
or an episode or something along those lines to really get into it. I think by doing what they did in episode 3, it's like by the time you get back to episode 4, you're kind of like you're halfway in between 3 and 4 trying to get back to where you were previously in the first two episodes.
And could I, in this, I know that a lot of people who liked a lot of the extraneous stuff in the last episode, but for me, I almost wonder if you cut down on some of the, shoe leather on the planet, in the forest. If you and then with last episode, if you cut down on some of the exposition there, because this episode was like 29 minutes without credits.
Yeah.
Like, I really feel like you could have combined these two episodes and intercut the flashback. I always want to. I in TV. I always prefer a episode that is intercut with flashbacks as opposed to a full on flashback episode. And I think that that could have worked well. Once again, I'm not Leslie Headland. I don't have all the I'm not. So I trust whatever her decision was, but I do wonder if you could have at least kept the momentum going a little bit. I mean, what I'm thinking about specifically is like what people forget with The Last of Us, the Bill and Frank episode. There are
Hmm.
5 minutes at the beginning that are Ellie and what's his face, Joel, and
Yeah.
then there are 5 minutes at the end. Like I
Yes.
think even just that I think is very important, and that's what I was missing with last episode. It's just like a check in of like the reason we're seeing this now is because of this moment that OSHA just had, or this moment May just had.
Actually, the intercutting flashback thing. A great example of this was a superhero show that kind of ushered in the modern era of superhero shows, Smallville, when they did the Lex Luthor flashbacks and stuff. They intercut all those things and brought you in and out
Hmm.
and back and forth through the episode, giving you the complete context of, oh, this is why this person is kind of crazy. This is why this
Yeah.
person is dealing with this. So to that point, I totally agree there. I think there is a way that these things can be structured as to where you didn't have to kind of completely take us out of it, because this was the thing. After the first two episodes, I felt pretty strongly like, oh, okay, I
Yeah.
got a good grasp on what this is and what they're
Yeah.
trying to do here. And then the third episode kind of takes it away from us a
and
little bit.
and like this is not a hard or fast rule, but I remember when I was in college learning about screenwriting and what have you, a rule that actually was taught, like once again, that like you can, like all rules, you can break it if you're good at it, is like it is bad writing to use a flashback just for the audience. A flashback needs to be something that a character is also experiencing. Now with TV, that's a little different because you can like tell a story ever you want. But I feel like last episode would have been much more impactful if we experienced it as May or Osha remembering it, as opposed to just like us getting it as a piece. Because what it felt like instead was if someone's telling you a story and they realize they forgot to give you context, you're like, oh right, yeah, my friend Jeff,
Yeah.
about him. And like I would have much preferred if there was something that happened to Mayor Osha that reminded them of that, because then the context we'd be seeing all of that in is them remembering these things. And I think that that would have been made this episode a little stronger too, because we would be thinking, not only is Osha experiencing this, she just remembered the experience she had with May. Like, so I think that that would have been a little more impactful. Once again, it's not the end of the world, but I
No.
think that that is a thing that, like, with these last episodes, particularly because this one was so short, and live television is not perfect, but the fact that every episode is about the same length, I think, is a good thing. I think it's really bad. A drama should be somewhere between 40 and 45 minutes. It doesn't need to be an hour. It doesn't need to be 30 minutes. And so I think this episode really suffered from the fact that it could be just 30 minutes long, because like there just was not enough meat on the bone for me.
Yeah, yeah, and now that we're halfway through, we got to see how they follow this up. At the outset of this show, we talked about the ambition. We talked about the idea that this was a different perspective. I want to see them kind of follow through on that and hit those points stronger. Hit those points as we get to the back half. The Vernestra point with the Jedi, the High Council, everything that's going on in the High Republic era. Want to see more of that. Shoot, even if you got me a scene or two with the Senate,
Mm-hmm.
seeing like what they're thinking as far as like, even though they don't know anything, I want to hear somebody in the Senate be like, "It seems like these Jedi. I don't know what the fuck they doing. Like
Yeah.
they
Well,
on some
because
dumb
clearly
shit."
things have happened to make them distrust them.
Exactly, exactly. So clearly there's something already there. So I would be interested in seeing that. I still, because I mentioned this last week, and I still kind of want to see it. What did Indara think about OSHA that
Mm-hmm.
said
Yeah.
like, no, you can't be,
Mm-hmm.
I can't have you here.
Yeah.
Like that's And now she says she quit on her own, but still, like there has to be an answer or something along those lines. Now there's like too many little nuggets that lead me to believe that OSHA is kind of on the fence of where her character truly lies in
Yeah.
terms of light and dark.
Yeah, and like, cause she also the way she says to Soul, like, as a Jedi, like, when asked to go on the trip, it's clear, like, she is not, like, anti-Jedi. She's not like, "You're a horrible," you know? And so
Yeah.
there is her relationship with the Jedi is not cut and dry, and so clearly there was something that happened in some way to lead everyone to agree it was not a good fit, and I agree that that is something I would like to see because I think that it will give us because, like, we know that Osha is an explorer and she's a little wayward, but, like, it's not that doesn't explain the full picture of how she ended up on random ships in the Outer Rim fixing stuff.
Yes. And it's clear that this series, to me, feels like it will end on in a tragic way.
Yeah,
It kind of feels like it has to
yeah.
because it needs to lead down the road to bring the Sith more into focus and
Mhm.
more into power. So that part will be interesting as well. See, it's interesting how we can critique the show and not just go crazy on. Oh well, they added a same-sex relationship.
Did
Oh,
you
there's two
see,
mothers, and they
um
created somebody. Oh my god! Oh
did
my
you see
god!
that
I
there
can't
was
believe it.
a tweet from a right-wing account that was like, "Star Wars introduces pronouns," because of the
Like,
bit
dog.
where, Osha says to Jecki, about I forget what's the guy's name? The cute guy, the tracker?
Oh, oh, you talking about? Wait, you're not talking about the animal
Yeah,
thing. You
the
talking?
animal. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can't remember his. I
Yeah,
can't remember
but
his name.
Osha says, what is his name?" Or,
What's
their
their
name,
name? Yeah.
which that's not like, people are like, "Oh my god, they're making Naba." It's a fucking animal. That's a normal thing to ask. You don't know. It's a fucking it's a space alien animal.
I
Like,
mean,
if you see a dog on the street, you might be like, "What's his their name?" Because you don't know that. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
nah. It just it reminds me of the in the first episode, folks was complaining about. Oh, why is there fire in space? Even though like there's like 5,000 Star Wars explosions that you could
Yeah.
clearly see fire in
I
space, and it's like, come on, man, what
I
are you
also
doing
think
here?
that someone even said, and I think this is correct, is like that is, I think, on purpose of like people who are taken out by that will not enjoy the show. And I also think like, yeah, I think that because when I was listening to Leslie Headland on my beloved Blank Check podcast, she did their episode on Zodiac, which was great.
Mm.
The great thing about that show is they get really famous people, not really famous people, like successful people, but to never talk about their own stuff. And so like she just briefly mentioned the Acolyte, and the thing that she said, which I thought was really smart, was like when they were like directing a lot of the stuff, especially the stuff in space, it was like there's a lot of discussion of like, wait, so if we the shots from here, where's the camera? And she's like, no. This is Star Wars, this is in space. Don't there's no cameras. Don't this is not a realistic thing. And I like that because I think that well, I usually am a fan of using realistic shooting styles for unrealistic things on Earth. I think Star Wars always has a different look. The opening of Star Wars is a fucking camera just sitting in space and gigantic ships going by. Like, I really like how Star Wars is not hard sci-fi, and people who want hard sci-fi, I've been told that The Expanse is good. So that's what I gotta say.
Yeah, I think at some point, folks. I mean, to them folks, and they don't listen to this show, but
Mm-mm.
if you do happen to catch this on YouTube, certain folks, I will just say this: maybe y'all need to find something else to watch. I mean,
Yeah,
it's really not that deep,
and I
man.
mean, and I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this in a non-condescending way. I've said this
Uh huh.
condescendingly many times, but I genuinely think that this is a real thing people have. Is that do you not enjoy Star Wars right now, or are you just upset that you're not 12 years old anymore? Because that's really I'm not saying I because I say that as like there are things in my life that I've not gotten much joy from as when I did when I was younger, and I would get mad, and it's like no. The thing I don't like is that I have to pay bills and I have to get up tomorrow morning for work. Like I think people want Star Wars to make them feel like it did when they're 8, and unfortunately, there is no piece of media that can
Nah,
make you
man.
feel like you did when you're 8. And I'm sympathetic to that at a point. But then what happens, of course, is because there's so many grifters who make money off of this, people who feel that way are told, no, you're right. There is
Yeah.
a conspiracy against you to make this feel like it didn't when you were 8 years old. And it's the woke agenda. And it's like, nah, man, it's because you got to pay bills. That's why you're upset. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Like, I mean, it's not similar like all the way, but it's kind of what I was talking about with the MCU going on for so
Yeah.
long. I mean, if
No,
you really
I
think
think
about
it
it,
is similar because a lot of people think about the ages of people.
yeah, it's like nobody thinks about when the thing started. The thing started when I was literally a young adult. Now I got two kids.
I was 12 years old when the MCU started. I mean,
Look at that, man.
yeah.
You're a man. Like Jesus.
Yeah.
Such a difference. So I think because people have no perspective with these things.
Yeah.
So It's like it's unfortunate that not only that and the media literacy, and we could go on for 90
Yeah,
years on that. But I'll just close with this: the I am, regardless of everything that we just said about like the things that we don't necessarily agree with and don't necessarily on board with the show, I'm still am on the positive side in the
same,
sense that they have
same.
decided to take this swing
Yeah,
because I do think it's a swing to do something different.
yeah,
And that's why it's interested me so much in these characters, especially the twins and Soul, and to see how their storyline plays out. And I mean, whenever they reveal the Sith person, that'll be cool too.
yeah.
But until then, let them beat the fuck out of people. That's
Oh,
that's
yeah.
that's all they need to
I'm
do.
excited for that. I love a good Sith beating the fuck out of people. I mean, it's very polarizing, but of course, Darth Vader, beating the shit out of people at the end of Rogue One was great.
Yes,
And so we get some of that. Because the thing is, don't think I didn't notice that there are a lot of unnamed Jedi in that forest. A lot of bodies to pile up.
exactly.
That Sith Lord
Like
can
they
go
had
through
like 10.
a lot of folks without killing your or soul. So they can go through a lot of people.
Well, 100%. So we'll see what happens with the Acolyte next week. Of course, it's always a pleasure to talk with Jake. Jake, where can we follow you? Where can we find you, my friend?
You can follow me at the J Christie. Please listen to my other podcast, Love It First Psych. Me and Andrew Barrera are almost done with season 6 of Psych. Very exciting.
Oh, you almost psyched out. My goodness
True.
gracious. Yes, yes. And you can follow me on Twitter at AnthonyCanton_3. Follow the show on all platforms at MC University Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You mentioned the Patreon at the top. We'll mention it again. If you want to, if you're on the fence, if you want to think about it, like just go to the preview for the Bad Boys and check that out. If that's something that you do, we're gonna be more in the line of bringing on folks that we love to talk to
Yep.
behind the wall for some of these pop culture films and things along those lines. And yeah, so like if you want to get in, just give it a try. And then also on top of that, we're getting close to Deadpool. We ain't far away. We're now
Nope.
close to a month. So Deadpool and Wolverine. We're looking forward to talking about that soon. We'll probably do Deadpool 2 beforehand.
Yep.
So that should be a lot of fun in the meantime. So yeah, keep supporting, subscribe to that YouTube channel, rate, review, like, follow on all of the listening accounts that whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, all those things that you could find on
I
your
think
podcast
Stitcher doesn't
apps.
exist anymore.
Oh, Stitcher's gone. Okay,
I
cool.
think so.
So Stitcher's out of here.
Let me actually double
But
check
yeah,
that.
but nonetheless,
No, it's still out here. Sorry about that.
all right.
I was thinking of another one. Sorry.
All right, so it's still out here, but nonetheless, the message still stands. Appreciate everybody for listening and supporting. So, for Jake Christie, I'm Anthony Canton III. This has been Marvel Cinematic University. We will talk to you next time.